Somebody's calling my name. What shall I do? Pray with me, if you will. We come on this glorious winter morning into this chapel, to this sanctuary, surrounded by the heavens and the trees that are telling of your glory. Help us, your people, to be worthy of and faithful to the hope and trust you have in us. Amen. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Preachers have that question every time we stand up here. I think you've heard that cry in a number of different places, a number of different ways in the last few weeks. Some of us have joined the cries. And we have looked for, if you're anything like me, some way to understand and answer. What can I do? What should I do? Oh, my Lord, what shall I do? So a few days ago, a meme, I think that's what this is, showed up on my Facebook page from a friend who can be counted on to have just the right one. It says, anyone want to meet up to just scream? We could get food after. What I like about this is that it allows me to feel and to take very seriously the rage, the confusion, the fear, the anger that I've been feeling these days. And it reminds me to eat. I need nourishment. A cousin of mine wrote me a note a few weeks ago, when I was not feeling well, and she said, rest yourself, have a snack. And suddenly I felt better. Anyway, again, I think, is this a meme? It's a little thing, right? It encourages me to give voice to the truth of my life as it is right now, and to tell the truth about it. And at the same time, reminds me to hope. There's a lot of bad news. It's scary, it's ugly, and it's coming at us hard and fast. But don't forget to eat. There is still good news, and you'll need nourishment. My father always said, I have never seen the righteous forsaken. That in times when things look especially bleak for one reason or another. I have never seen the righteous forsaken. And then my mother would sing, morning by morning, new mercies I see. But how? Where does that kind of hope, that kind of trust come from? What shall I do? As I'm sure you know from the flying emails, several voices have responded to our cries of hope. My meme, one of them. Anne Lamott is another example. She says, my fight song will be left foot, right foot, breathe. Help the poor however you can. Plant bulbs right now in the cold rock soil and rest. I found this very helpful for me, and Anne Lamott is a Sunday school teacher, so I know I can trust her. Diana Butler Bass, I don't know if she teaches Sunday school or not, but she's taught an awful lot of folk in seminary and beyond. She offered what she called the 10 W's, right? And she called that a kind of spiritual architectural plan to survive the political fire. That is, of course, if you need to survive the political fire. I'm sure there are those within the sound of my voice who are glad to see the news every day, but I cannot claim to be one of them. What shall I do has been my cry for a long time recently. And the short answer that comes to me, not surprisingly in the words of one of the old hymns of the church, is hold to God's unchanging hand. And if you know that song, and I know James does, the first verse begins, time is filled with swift transitions, naught of earth unmoved can stand. Build your hopes on things eternal. You better hold to God's unchanging hand. And the second verse is one I like even more right now. Trust in him who will not leave you. Whatsoever years may bring, if by earthly friends forsaken, still more closely to him cling. And then the verse goes, hold to his hand, God's unchanging hand. Hold to his hand, God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. You gotta hold to God's unchanging hand. And you have to sway like this too, and tap your foot. And then at the end, when it gets really good, you say, hold to his hand. Hold on and don't let go his hand. That's when it starts to get real good, right? Hold on and don't let go his hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. You gotta hold to God's unchanging hand. Yeah, but what does that look like? What shall I do? How do we hold on? From my days wrestling, and I mean wrestling, not only with the 4 texts that we have in our lectionary, and you really ought to read them, because they're call stories. All of them have to do with how and when God calls us, and how you know when the voice of the Lord has come to you. It doesn't come to me often. I like to know people to whom it does, and I listen to them. I listen to them because it is a voice. In any case, in wrestling with all of those texts, and in wrestling as you've probably known by now, with some of the history of this congregation, I have created a survival list for myself. I offer it to you. It is, gather together, we need each other, which is why I said at the end of my note on Friday, see at church, be there, be square. Gather together, cultivate imagination, give your inner poet full rein, turn her loose, pray for courage, encourage each other. Encourage has in it what it wants to do. Encourage each other. Pray for courage. Breathe. Rest when you need to. And don't forget to eat. What does that look like? What does all of that look like? Well, it's something I've wanted to share for a long time. I'm not sure why it came up here, but it did. And I listened. And the more I listened, the clearer it became, for me anyway, that Baby Suggs' sermon in the clearing is a message for us right now. In it, I think you see all of those survival tools. This is an excerpt, not a terribly long one, from Toni Morrison's novel, Beloved. I'm going to tell you the truth. I've never read Beloved. No, Peggy, I haven't. And the reason for that is the same reason I don't watch surgical procedures on video. Surgeons must use terrible violence to perform or hope for healing. And I think that's actually what Toni Morrison was doing in that book. Books like that bring us into the world of slavery in this country are, well, I might have to read it holding someone else's hand. So, some of you will know this scene. It describes a gathering of enslaved people in the bushes where they retreat for worship, if you will. A worship which opens them to an alternate world, the world of God's abundant life and hope. Listen, see if you don't hear it. Hear all of those things too. After situating herself on a huge, flat-sided rock, Baby Suggs bowed her head and prayed silently. The company watched her from the trees. They knew she was ready when she put her stick down and then shouted, "Let the children come." And they ran from the trees toward her. "Let your mothers hear you laugh," she told them, and the woods rang. The adults looked on and could not help smiling. Then, "Let grown men come," she shouted. They stepped out, one by one, from among the ringing trees. "Let your wives and your children see you dance," she told them, and ground life shuddered underneath their feet. Finally, she called the women to her. "Cry," she told them. "For the living and the dead, just cry." And without covering their eyes, the women let loose. It started that way, laughing children, dancing men, crying women, and then it got mixed up. Women stopped crying and danced. Men sat down and cried. Children cried until children danced, women laughed, children cried until exhausted and riven, all and each lay about the clearing, damp and gasping for breath. In the silence that followed, Baby Suggs, holy, offered up to them her great big heart. She did not tell them to clean up their lives or to go and sin no more. She did not tell them that they were the blessed of the earth, its inheriting meek, or its glory-bound pure. She told them that the only grace they could have was the grace they could imagine. That if they could not see it, they could not have it. She said to them, the only grace they could have was the grace they could imagine. If they could not see it, they could not have it. The only hope we can have is the hope we can imagine. The only trust we can have is the trust we can imagine. If we cannot see it, we will not have it. What shall I do? Gather together. We need each other. We need help. Cultivate imagination. Give your inner artist full rein. Turn her loose. Pray for courage. Why do we come here? My answer has always been to find in our praying, in our singing, and in the proclamation, the courage to be the people we want most to be. We need that courage. The courage to be trusting, the courage to hope. Breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. Rest when you need to. And don't forget to eat. That story does not tell you what happens almost immediately after that worship service, but where I came up, it always did. After a worship service like that, you would retire or adjourn to the fellowship hall for Sunday supper, because you need the nourishment. We'd adjourn to Sunday supper. We'd gather around a table and share the gifts that build our bodies and our spirits. Food needed for what comes next. Just as we will in this service today. Don't forget to eat. That enactment in the clearing, like our enactment here. An enactment summoned by Baby Suggs' words, liberating and life-affirming. This is what it looks like. It's what shall I do? It was their best hope, and it's ours. Amen.